Have you ever really stopped to think about how a simple medicine, a tiny little pill, actually gets made? It is a wild, decade-long journey. And today, we're going to break it all down by pretending we're running a popcorn factory. Yep, you heard me right. Let's get into it. Believe it or not, this is the whole story right here. It all starts with one little idea, or kernel of corn. And it ends, if everything goes perfectly, with a happy, healthy patient. We are going to unpack every single one of these little steps. It's such a simple question, right? But the answer is anything but. So let's start with what this whole thing is officially called. Okay, so at its core, drug development is really just about creating a giant, super detailed rule book. Imagine you've discovered a magical kind of popcorn that can make people better. You can't just sell it, you have to prove it works. You have to prove it's safe. And you have to prove that every single bag you make is absolutely identical. That's the whole game. So where does it all begin? Well, it all starts in the lab. And this isn't about finding one good idea. Oh no. It's about sorting through thousands of bad ones just to find that one little glimmer of hope. The first 6 years or so are just this brutal process of elimination. First, scientists are on the hunt for that one special kernel out of literally thousands of possibilities. Then chemists take over and spend years just tweaking the recipe, trying to make it safer, stronger, better. And finally, before it ever gets close to a person, it has to survive a whole battery of tests in lab dishes and in animals. So before you can even think about testing in humans, you have to run these preclinical tests. And scientists are basically asking two really simple but incredibly important questions. Number one, is it toxic? And number two, what does it actually do inside a living thing? This is a massive hurdle where so many promising ideas just die. And this brings us to a super important idea called CMC. You can think of CMC as a secret ingredient for this whole process. It is the science, the absolute obsession with making sure your recipe is perfect and repeatable. It doesn't matter if you're making a tiny pinch or a million pills, they have to be identical. This rulebook is what guarantees everything is safe and consistent. All right, so after years and years in the lab, if a molecule is one of the lucky few to survive, it's finally ready for the next big step, the human taste test. This is where we get into the famous clinical trials. So human testing is broken down into 3 big hurdles. Phase 1 is all about safety. You give the drug to a very small group of healthy volunteers just to make sure it's safe for people. Phase 2 is the first time you ask the big question, does this thing actually work? You test it in a few hundred patients who have the disease. And if that goes well, you move on to phase 3, the giant global final exam to prove once and for all that it's safe and effective for thousands of people. Let's just pause on phase 2 for a second, because this is the moment of truth. This is where the dream so often dies. You're giving your potential medicine to real patients and comparing it against a placebo, or boring plain popcorn. And you're asking, does it really help them? About half of all the drugs that even make it this far fail right here. It is an enormous hurdle. And all this time, while these human trials are going on, that CMC rulebook we talked about, it gets really serious. A full-blown quality control system gets put in place. Every single batch that's made gets tested. Every tiny step in the factory is watched and controlled. The goal is to make absolutely certain that the pill given to patient number 1 is a perfect twin of the one given to patient number 3000. So let's say your drug is a superstar. It survives a decade of work, it passes all 3 phases of clinical trials. You've made it to the final boss, getting the government's stamp of approval. And when I say paperwork, I am not exaggerating. The final document you submit to the regulators, it's often over 100,000 pages long. Think about that. It's every single piece of data from the entire 10-year-plus journey all bundled up. So what on earth is in that mountain of paper? Well, if we peek inside just the CMC section, it details everything. You've got the drug substance, which is the recipe for the pure active chemical. You've got the drug product, which is the full plan for making the final pill. And then you have all the proof that your factory meets every single government rule. Every detail gets put under a microscope. So now that we've seen the whole assembly line, let's talk about the cold, hard reality of it all. The numbers behind this journey are, well, they're just mind-blowing. 10,000. That is roughly how many potential drugs scientists might screen at the very beginning, just to find one that eventually gets approved and makes it to patients. The odds from the start are just astronomical. 12 years. That's the average time commitment. A full dozen years from that little spark of an idea in a lab to a medicine a doctor can actually prescribe. And the cost? Okay, get ready for this. $2.6 billion. That's the average price tag to develop a single new medicine, and that number includes the cost of all the thousands of failures along the way. And maybe this is the most shocking stat of all. Even for the drugs that are promising enough to make it all the way to human testing, 90% of them will still fail. The failure rate is just absolutely brutal. So after hearing all that, you have to be asking, why? Why is this so ridiculously hard and expensive and long? Well, it all boils down to a relentless, non-negotiable pursuit of perfection and safety. Here are some of the biggest reasons why. First, what works in a tiny glass flask in a lab often works totally differently in a giant factory tank. Scaling up is incredibly hard. Then there's impurity control. You have to track down and control every unwanted chemical, even tiny traces. You're also dealing with this global mess of dozens of different government agencies, all with their own rules. And on top of all that, every single thing must be perfectly documented. There's a saying in the pharmaceutical world that just perfectly captures this entire mindset. If it wasn't written down, it didn't happen. That's it. In the eyes of a regulator, if there is no record, it never happened. That's the level of precision we're talking about. So I want to leave you with this thought. It is so easy to look at a simple little pill and not think twice about it. But next time you see one, maybe you'll see something different. Maybe you'll see the incredible science, the staggering cost, and the decade of work from thousands of people, all packed into that one tiny object.